Welcome back, guys. So now we're going to talk about why do population numbers rise and why do they fall? And in this class, how do we measure that? And so we're going to start with the birth rate. And put simply, birth rate is just the number of births per 1,000 people alive in a place. Now, you don't just want to put the number of births in a country because countries have different population sizes. So by doing it the number of births per 1,000 people, that allows us to compare different sized countries. Here on this chart, the x-axis left to right is how much money they have in their country, and the y-axis up and down is the number of children they have, their birth rate. And you can see the countries that have money tend to have a much lower birth rate, and the countries that don't have a ton of money tend to have a much higher birth rate. So the site Our World in Data has some really cool graphs to look at, and you can see the birth rate by country in 2020. You see that America's birth rate has been going down, and that's pretty consistent with others. You'll see Spain has this dip, France has a dip, but America almost the whole time has been going more down. And when we take a look, we bring it all the way back to 1950, we see how much higher the birth rate was, specifically in places like Africa, Asia, Latin America. But through the years, we see that birth rate just get lower and lower for the most part. Another rate to look at is mortality rate, the number of deaths per 1,000 people. And in general, a country is considered healthy if this rate is low. However, some really healthy nations have higher death rates because they have a high number of elderly people, or they might be at a war. There could be a number of reasons that are causing a high mortality rate. A better statistic to look at in terms of healthcare is infant mortality rate. And it's a pretty sad statistic, but it's a very useful statistic. It measures the number of babies who die before their first birthday, and that's expressed out of 1,000 babies born, again to make it so we can compare different countries. And so improved healthcare, medicine, and nutrition lead to lower IMR, which is infant mortality rate. And so this map shows us the infant mortality rate for 2017. You see the countries with the lowest infant mortality rate are in Europe, Australia, and Canada, where then the US is in that second group, that second lowest, with much of Asia. As the numbers get higher and higher, as the infant mortality raises, we tend to be concentrated in Africa or Southern Asia. And then when we look at this through time, we can see how Africa, Asia, the whole world is lowering their infant mortality rate, which is a great thing. The next term that's important when measuring population change is life expectancy, which is of course the average number of years a person in a certain place can expect to live. And let me show you why life expectancy is so important when you're measuring change in population. This chart shows us how life expectancy has changed over time from 1543 to 2015. And we can see for much of that time until the mid-1800s, life expectancy stayed at about 40 years. And then it skyrocketed all the way up to where it is today. And while life expectancy was skyrocketing, so was the world population, because as people lived longer and longer, populations continued to grow. Now, one thing that's really worth mentioning is this is an average, and so it wasn't like people here were all dying at around 38, 39, 40, 41. You know, those who lived a long life lived just about as long as people do today. But what brought the number down were the number of babies that were dying, the number of babies that weren't making it to their first birthday. Because just like this map showed us, infant mortality rate has been going down during that time, which is raising life expectancy rates. You can see here in 1800, the whole world had a life expectancy around 29 years old. Then in 1950, the global life expectancy jumps to 46 years old, again because healthcare is getting better and more children are surviving to adulthood. Till you get to 2015, where 71 years is the global average. Look at that, in just 65 years, we've almost doubled the global average life expectancy. Our world isn't perfect, but we're doing things a lot better than we used to be. And this one final thing isn't really about measuring population change, but you're going to use it for the homework. And that's population density, which is basically how crowded a place is. It's the average number of people per square mile living in a measurable area. So a city like Chicago is going to be much more dense, have a higher population density than a suburb like Rolling Meadows. And so you can see places like Europe and Asia have pretty high population densities, where much of the rest of the world has a far lower population density. America has so much more space compared to the crowded places of Europe, India, and China. All right, and that's measuring population change. Make sure you submit your notes or your written or recorded reflection, and we'll see you back in class.